Hello guys, you join me in the middle of the night for a 24-hour motor race. Now it's not exactly Le Mans or Spa 24 hours or anything like that, but it is one that everyone wants to win. It's the EnduroKA 24 hours of Anglesey. Now, if you've never been to Anglesey before, it's a pretty cool track. It's in a beautiful setting, overlooking the sea and the mountains of Snowdonia National Park. And the layout that we were going to be using for this race also had a corkscrew similar to Laguna Seca. Maybe not quite as steep, but it still looked pretty cool. And I couldn't wait to get out on track and give it a go. Now, to give you some context to the race, there were 2 qualifying sessions for this one, mainly due to the high number of drivers involved with each team. For me though, this was just about getting up to speed, getting familiar with the track because I'd never driven it before, and also just brushing off some of the cobwebs. This was the first time I'd been out on track all year, so I just needed to get myself up to speed really. Meanwhile, our teammate Adam put us on pole position, so we'd be starting the race from the front. It was Dan Sylvester who had the task of starting the race for us, and you may know him as Danny DC2 on YouTube. And after initially dropping down a couple of places, he started having a really good battle with some of the other front runners and eventually got back into first place. This did come at a bit of a cost though, because the tyre wear ended up being extremely high. You can see from these tyres here just how bad they were when they came off at the end of Danny's stint. So we just had to be really careful for the rest of the race and try to get the tyres to last 2 stints rather than 1. So for the remainder of the afternoon and evening, we had Adam Blair in the car. He's the shortest member of the team and normally puts us on pole. Then we had Mark Witherington, who's achieved multiple podiums and wins in EnduroKA. And finally, Scott Parkin, who is known for racing pretty much every weekend of the year, and he took us into the nighttime running. Now, by the time I was in the car, it was around about 1 AM in the morning, and my biggest fear was that I was just going to feel really tired. I've been awake quite a long time throughout the day, and you know, if you're driving home late from somewhere, you've had a long day out, you can feel very sleepy at the wheel. But to my surprise, it felt almost identical to racing during the day. Your mind gets into a state where you're just 100% focused on the task in hand, and honestly, I did not notice at all that it was so late at night and that I'd normally be tucked up in bed. So as you can see, I've just started passing a few cars. Now, I began my stint under safety car conditions, and this was the first green flag lap, and I was currently in 2nd place, but there were lots of cars up ahead that needed to be overtaken. You can see just up the road here, all those headlights going around the next couple of corners, so there was a lot of work to do, and I wasn't getting any assistance at all really from the blue flags. Running through the middle of the night, I don't think the marshals find it particularly easy to tell which car is which, so I had to pass the cars like for like out on track. No floodlights either, as you can see, going around, so it was very dark out there, and we were purely reliant on our own headlights and the headlights of other cars to see where we were going. But to be honest, it was actually pretty alright, and your eyes quickly adapted and got used to knowing where the corners were, knowing when to turn in, and you know, where the apex was to each corner. It was a bit weird at first, but once you knew exactly what you needed to be doing, you got into a nice rhythm and actually started driving pretty well. Now, the tyres that I had on the car for my stint were on their 2nd stint, so they're the ones that Scott had during his time in the car, and this meant I just had to look after them. I wanted to make sure that they did last the full stint and we didn't have to pit early due to a tyre delamination or a puncture or anything like that. So I had to drive well within my limits, but still put in laps that were fast enough to not end up out of position in the race. We were probably around about 30 seconds behind the leader, I think, at the start of my stint. So it was just about managing that gap, just making sure we were there or thereabouts. Obviously, every time we put a new set of tyres on the car, we're going to be a little bit quicker. So it was just about management really throughout this whole stint. There was probably a half a second maybe a lap faster if I really wanted to push it, but that could have just sent the tyres over the edge, and then I would have had nothing left at the end of the stint, and maybe even would have had to pit earlier. So the track was very abrasive, and I started getting quite a lot of pickup on my own tyres, little bits of discarded rubber from other tyres on other cars, and this was just giving me some minor vibrations at the end of the straights and through some of the longer corners, but it wasn't too much of an issue, and I still had a reasonable amount of grip, and certainly enough grip to continue making my way through the cars up ahead. So the onboard footage we're seeing in this video is probably the most exciting parts of my stint, where I'm battling amongst other cars. There were lots of laps though that I was driving completely by myself out in a bit of a no man's land as we get waved through by the Shine Automotive car there. So some good sportsmanship from them. It's always beneficial with such a long race like this, 24 hours, if you see a faster car coming up behind, just to let them go. You'll lose less time that way, and you'll also reduce the risk of picking up any damage by getting into unnecessary battles with other cars, as I send it down the inside of the yellow car. But he's going to have a bit of a comeback through the right hand hairpin, and then unfortunately we're going to get a bit of a switch back here and get a much better exit, better traction, and then we have the inside line for the next corner and manage to get past. Now, it wasn't long before a conveniently timed safety car came out, and that forced me to end my stint and come into the pit lane. It's always more beneficial to pit under a safety car in endurance racing because you save so much time when you need to refuel, change tyres and have a driver swap. So the next driver that was in the car is Phil Keane. Now, you may know Phil Keane as a Lamborghini GT3 driver in British GT, and if you're one of my subscribers who plays a lot of Assetto Corsa Competizione, he's also an AI driver on that game too. So at the end of my stint, I'd come into the pit lane and we were still in second place. I think probably about 40 seconds off the lead at this stage. So I handed the car over to Phil and went off to sleep. Now, motorsport isn't quite as glamorous at this level, and I was staying in a tent, and it started raining pretty hard during the night whilst Phil was out in the car. He put in a mega stint though, and then handed over to Dan in the early hours of the morning. By the time I'd woken up and gone back to the pit lane to see what was going on, we were back in the lead of the race. We were, however, being very closely followed by the number 18 Axia Metrics car, and because we were a little bit out of sync with the pit stops, every time we came into the pits, they would take the lead of the race, and then when they came into the pits, we would take the lead of the race. So it was all going to come down to who was in the lead and had enough fuel in the car to take the checkered flag first. Unfortunately though, we picked up a stop-go penalty in one of our pit stops, and this effectively meant we had no chance of winning the race, unfortunately. So it was Mark in the car who crossed the line to come home in second place. So a podium finish, great result at the end of the day after 24 hours of racing. A big shout out to Jay for building such a fantastic race car, and of course the Dark Side Developments crew for looking after us for the full 24 hours. And thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you back soon in the future.